The storm clouds had been gathering over the mountains since early afternoon, rolling in slowly like dark waves across the sky. By sunset, the wind had begun to rise, howling through the tall pines and carrying flakes of snow long before the storm truly arrived. Elias, a young fur trader accustomed to the silence of the wilderness, guided his tired mule down the narrow road that led into the small mountain town. His clothes were layered but worn, his boots stiff with cold, and his breath formed small white clouds as he walked. For weeks he had been deep in the wild forest valleys, trapping beavers and small game. The winter had been harder than most, colder, longer, and lonelier. Many nights, the only sound around him was the crackle of his small fire and the distant cry of an owl. Now, after such a long time alone, the warm glow of lanterns in the town felt like the first friendly light he had seen in days. At the center of the settlement stood a small wooden inn. It wasn't large or fancy, but it had a steady reputation. Among travelers, warm beds, honest food, and a kind owner who treated everyone fairly. Mara, the widow who ran the place, had lived in the town nearly her whole life. Her husband had built the inn with his own hands years earlier, and after he passed away, she kept it running out of duty, memory, and the quiet hope that it still mattered. As Elias approached, snowflakes began to fall heavier, landing on his hair and sticking to his coat. He looked exhausted, but there was a gentle strength in his eyes, something steady, polite, and sincere. When he pushed open the inn's wooden door, a soft bell above it chimed. Warm air washed over him immediately, carrying the scent of stew, wood smoke. In fresh bread, Mara stood behind the counter, folding linens. She looked up, and her first reaction was a mix of surprise and concern. Travelers almost never arrived this late, especially not with a storm rolling in. But when she saw Elias's tired face and frost-touched hands, her expression softened. "You must have been on the road for hours," she said in a calm, welcoming voice. Elias nodded, lowering his pack carefully. "It's getting bad outside. I was hoping for a room tonight, if you have one left." "We always have a place for someone who needs shelter," Mara replied kindly. She set the linens aside. "How long will you be staying?" "Just tonight. Just till the storm passes," Elias said, brushing snow from his coat. Normally he would reach for the small pouch on his belt to pay, but this time he froze for a moment. The pouch was nearly empty. He had used his last coins buying oats for his mule earlier that day. He looked down for a breath, then quietly opened his pack. Inside were soft, neatly prepared furs, each cleaned with care. They were worth far more than the price of a single night at an inn. With thoughtful respect, he placed 10 of his finest furs on the counter. Mara blinked, surprised. 10 furs? For one night? Her voice carried a mix of confusion and almost disbelief. Elias straightened his shoulders a little, not wanting to seem desperate. "I don't have coin left, only these. They're clean and good quality. If you can accept them, I'll be grateful." The inn grew very quiet. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, but inside, the only sound was the soft crackle of the fireplace. Mara had seen many travelers, men passing through with loud laughter, merchants with polished boots, hunters with rough voices. But this young trader's offer was different. He wasn't trying to impress her, and he wasn't bargaining or boasting. He was simply being honest, offering more than required because he believed it was the right thing to do. "You don't need to give this much," she said gently. "A single fur is enough for the room, and even that is generous." Elias shook his head. "You run this place alone? You keep it warm. You offer safety on nights like this. A warm bed during a storm is worth far more than one fur to me." Mara held his gaze for a moment. She saw fatigue in his eyes, yes, but also sincerity, respect, and a kind of quiet integrity that made her heart soften unexpectedly. Still, 10 furs were too many. She folded 3 of them aside and pushed the rest back toward him. "I cannot take so much," she said. "Please take these back. I'll accept only what is fair." Elias hesitated, then nodded respectfully. "If that's what you wish." "It is," she replied with a small, warm smile. "Now come in properly. Take off those wet things before you catch a chill. I'll get you something warm to eat." Elias felt a strange sense of relief. Not just because she accepted less payment, but because she spoke with a kindness he had rarely experienced. He removed his coat and scarf, setting them near the fire to dry. The room around him felt peaceful. Wooden tables, soft lamplight, a few handmade quilts, and shelves lined with clay mugs and dried herbs. Mara moved quietly but efficiently, ladling hot stew into a bowl and placing a thick slice of bread beside it. She carried it to the table near the fire, the warm glow touching her face and soft features. Elias sat gratefully, and she placed the meal in front of him. "You should warm up first," she said. "Rooms can wait." He picked up the spoon, and the first bite almost made his eyes close. It wasn't fancy food, but it tasted like care, simple, hearty, comforting. Mara watched him with gentle satisfaction, happy to see someone appreciate her cooking. After a moment, she pulled out a chair and sat across from him, folding her hands calmly. It wasn't something she did often with guests, but something about Elias felt different, safe, respectful, familiar in a distant sort of way. "You've been in the mountains long?" she asked. "A few weeks," he replied. "The snow came early, so trapping was harder this season." He looked at the fire, thoughtful. "It gets quiet out there. Some days you forget what a human voice even sounds like." Mara nodded slowly. She knew loneliness well. After her husband passed, the inn had grown quiet in a different way. Rooms stayed empty longer, laughter faded sooner, evenings stretched out endlessly. She studied Elias for a moment. His clothes were simple, but well cared for. His hands were rough but clean. His posture was respectful, not tense or proud. He spoke with a gentle calm that made the room feel warmer. "You must be tired," she said softly. Elias offered a small smile. "I think the winter took more energy from me than I realized." "The room is ready whenever you are," she said. "You can rest as long as you need." He nodded gratefully. "Thank you, truly." The storm outside grew heavier. Snow tapped against the windows in steady rhythms, and the wind began to whistle through the edges of the roof. But inside, the inn stayed warm, lit by fire and lanterns, steady and safe, like a quiet shelter against the world. Elias finished his meal slowly, savoring each bite. For the first time in weeks, he felt fully warm. Mara stood and collected the empty bowl, her movements calm and smooth. "I'll bring more firewood inside," she said, reaching for a shawl. Elias rose quickly. "Let me do it. You've already done much for me." Mara paused, studying him carefully. Most travelers simply accepted warmth and food without offering anything in return. But this young trader insisted on helping, the same way he had insisted on giving too many furs. It wasn't pride, it was simply who he was. "I won't stop you if you wish to help," she said with a gentle smile. He nodded once, then pulled on his coat and stepped back into the cold. The wind hit him immediately, sharp and icy, but he pushed through it, collecting the stacked firewood beside the inn. When he returned, snow dusted his hair again, but he carried the wood easily, setting it down near the hearth. "Thank you, Mara," said sincerely. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he replied simply. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly between them, and the light played gently across their faces. Outside, the storm had fully settled in, but inside, everything felt steady and warm. "Your room is upstairs," Mara said softly. "Third door on the left. It's small, but the blankets are thick." "I hope you rest well," Elias nodded. "I'm sure I will. Thank you again for everything." Mara smiled, a soft, tired smile she hadn't felt in a long time. "Good night, Elias." "Good night," he replied. He climbed the creaking wooden stairs slowly, each step feeling strangely comforting. The small room awaited him, simple yet warm, lit by a single lantern. As he spread the blankets and lay down, the storm howled outside, but for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel alone. Downstairs, Mara stood by the fire, staring at the 10 furs he had offered and the 3 she kept. She touched one gently, thinking about the man upstairs, quiet, respectful, sincere. She didn't know why, but something about him stirred a feeling she thought she had lost long ago: trust. The storm raged on, but the inn stayed warm, and without knowing it, Both of them had already taken the first small steps toward something neither of them expected. The storm grew heavier through the night, covering the small mountain town in a deep blanket of snow. The wind whistled softly around the wooden inn, shaking the shutters and carrying flakes that sparkled like dust in the lantern light. Inside, however, everything stayed warm and peaceful. The fire burned steadily in the stone hearth, casting a soft orange glow across the wooden floor. Upstairs, Elias rested under thick quilts, but sleep came only lightly. Maybe it was the long weeks of silence in the wilderness still clinging to him. Or maybe it was the unfamiliar comfort of a real bed. Whatever the reason, he found himself awake, staring quietly at the ceiling as the storm hummed outside, downstairs. Mara sat alone near the fire, mending a loose seam on one of the quilts. She worked slowly, almost absent-mindedly, her thoughts drifting back to the traveler, who now slept upstairs. She had met many people running the inn, yet Elias felt different, gentle, polite, and quietly thoughtful. Something about his simple kindness lingered in her mind more than she expected. After a while, Elias stepped quietly down the stairs. He didn't want to disturb anyone, but the soft glow of the fire drew him in. Mara looked up, surprised for a moment, then smiled softly. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice low and warm. Elias shook his head with a faint smile. "Not really. I think my body is used to sleeping lightly. Always listening to the forest." Mara nodded. "The wilderness changes a person. After my husband passed, I spent months alone here. It took time for my body to stop listening for every sound." Elias hesitated before taking a few steps closer. "If this is a bad time, I can go back upstairs." "It's not a bad time," Mara replied gently. "Please sit. The fire is warm tonight." Elias pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Snow tapped gently against the windows, and the room felt strangely peaceful, like the storm outside had sealed them to a small, safe world of their own. For a few moments, they sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle. Mara set aside her needle and thread, folding the quilt neatly on her lap. She studied Elias with a soft expression, noticing the tiredness around his eyes, but also the quiet strength behind it. "You work alone in the mountains?" she asked. He nodded. "Mostly, yes. My father taught me trapping when I was young. After he passed, I kept going. It's simple work. Honest. But it can feel lonely too." Mara lowered her gaze thoughtfully. "Loneliness can be heavier than snow sometimes." Elias looked at her, sensing the truth behind her words. "You must have carried a lot since your husband passed." She inhaled slowly, but her voice stayed calm. "He was a good man. He built this inn with his own hands. After he was gone, I didn't know what to do at first. But the inn kept me steady. It gave me a purpose, even on days when my heart felt tired." Elias listened quietly, giving her the space to share without pushing for more. He didn't speak about her pain. He simply listened, which somehow made her feel heard in a way she hadn't felt in years. Outside, the wind howled softly. Inside, the fire warmed the air between them. "What about you?" Mara asked after a moment. "Doesn't the wilderness feel heavy sometimes?" Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes there are days when the silence feels peaceful, and days when it feels endless. Sometimes I wish I had a place like this to return to. A small home, a warm fire, someone to speak with at the end of the day." Mara's eyes softened, and something gentle moved in her expression. "Homes like that are rare," she said quietly. "Maybe," Elias replied, "but I still hope for one someday." Ada. Mara looked at him for a long moment. His voice was calm, but she could hear the truth beneath it, a simple hope, not loud or desperate, just honest. It touched her more than she expected. The fire popped softly in the hearth. "Would you like some tea?" Mara asked, standing before he could answer. Elias started to rise too. "I can help now," she said with a small smile. "You rest. I run this place. Making tea is the least I can do for someone who braved a storm." Elias sat back down, watching her move gracefully behind the counter. She heated water in a small kettle, added dried mint leaves, and filled 2 simple clay cups. When she returned, The warm smell of mint followed her. It's comforting and calming. Elias wrapped his hands around the cup gratefully. "Thank you. You're welcome," she replied, settling into her chair again. They sipped the tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through their hands and chests. The storm continued, but it felt far away. Held back by the inn's thick walls and steady fire. "What made you offer so many furs earlier?" Mara asked softly. "Most people would hold on to their best goods." Elias gave a small, humble shrug. "You offer warmth, food, and safety. Most places don't treat travelers kindly. I just wanted to pay fairly, but 10 furs was far too much," she said gently. "Maybe," Elias answered, "but kindness is rare. I didn't want to take advantage of yours." Mara looked down at her tea, her eyes thoughtful. "Not many people think like that anymore," Elias smiled. "Maybe there are more than we think. They're just quiet." A soft laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "Quiet kindness," she repeated. "I like that." For a long moment neither of them spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because silence had become comfortable, warm, and shared. Elias set his empty cup down. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" he asked gently. Mara shook her head. "No, this is my home. My memories are here, even the sad ones. And the people here, they trust me. They depend on this little inn more than they realize." Elias nodded. "It suits you. You run it with heart." Mara's cheeks warmed slightly at the compliment, though she tried to hide it by tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you," she said softly. Outside, the snow fell harder. The lantern light flickered, and the fire cast slow shadows across the walls. The inn felt like a place out of time, a shelter where stories grew naturally in the quiet hours. Elias leaned back slowly, resting his shoulders. "It feels peaceful here," he said. "Safer than anywhere I've been in months." Mara looked at him, her gaze warm and steady. "You're safe here," she said firmly, the words carrying more meaning than she planned. She almost looked away. But Elias held her gaze gently, not boldly, not strongly, just calmly, like someone who understood the value of soft connections. After a moment, Mara stood. "Let me add more wood," she said, picking up a small piece. Elias rose at the same time. "Please let me." She hesitated, then nodded. He placed a few logs into the fire, coaxing the flames higher. The warmth spread quickly, filling the room. "Thank you," she said again, her voice softer this time. "You thank me too much," Elias replied with a gentle smile. "I only want to help." Mara returned the smile, and for a second, she felt lighter, almost like the heavy years had loosened their grip on her heart. When she sat down again, Elias joined her, and they continued talking slowly, easily, like two people whose hearts had been tired for too long and finally found a peaceful place to rest their thoughts. They spoke about simple things. The wildlife Elias had seen, the colors of the sky in early winter, the small traditions of the mountain town. Mara shared stories about travelers she had met, funny mistakes she made when she first ran the inn alone, and the small joys she found in daily life: fresh bread, clean rooms, warm fires. Time passed gently. Eventually, Mara noticed Elias's eyes growing heavy. "You should rest," she said softly. "You've had a long journey." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe you should rest too," she smiled, touched by his concern. "I will, after the fire settles." He stood slowly, collecting his coat. "Thank you." "For the company?" "Thank you," she replied. "For listening." Climbed the stairs again, quieter this time. When he reached his room, he paused, looking down at the warm glow from the common room. Mara was still there, sitting by the fire, thoughtful and calm. Elias let out a slow breath. He didn't know why, but something inside him felt different, lighter, warmer, as if the night had given him a small gift he didn't expect. Downstairs, Mara watched the fire with a soft smile. She didn't know where that warmth in her chest came from, but it felt gentle and real. The storm continued outside, but inside the inn, two lonely hearts had begun to find comfort not in dramatic ways, but in simple honesty, shared stories, and a peaceful night of understanding. The storm finally began to weaken in the early morning hours, long before the mountain town woke. The heavy snowfall softened into a gentle drift, and the wind slowly lost its sharp voice. As dawn approached, a pale golden light spread across the horizon, touching the roofs and hills with a soft glow. The town looked peaceful under the deep blanket of snow quiet, untouched and still. Inside the inn, the fire had died down to warm embers. The air smelled faintly of cedar wood and fresh dough. Mara stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, mixing dough for the morning bread. She had barely slept, yet her heart felt strangely light, as if the long night of conversation had cleared a silent weight she had carried for years. Every now and then, she caught herself glancing toward the stairs, expecting to hear footsteps. She reminded herself that Elias was a guest, nothing more. But his gentle honesty, the way he spoke with quiet sincerity, and the respect he showed it, had all touched her deeper than she expected. By the time the dough was set and the small kitchen warmed, Mara prepared a simple breakfast: warm bread, butter, and a pot of tea. She worked calmly, but her mind kept wandering to the traveler sleeping upstairs. As she arranged everything neatly, she felt a quiet desire to show him kindness equal to what he had shown last night. Upstairs, Elias woke slowly. The first thing he noticed was the warmth of the room. The second was the silence. No storm, no wind rattling the shutters. Just a peaceful morning glow filtering through the small window. For the first time in weeks, he had slept deeply. His body felt rested, his mind calm. He sat up, stretching his arms, feeling the soft comfort of the thick quilts. There had been many nights in the wilderness when the cold had made his bones ache. But here in this simple room, he felt warmth that came not only from the fire, but from something unspoken: kindness, presence, connection. He washed his face with cold water from a small basin and put on his coat. When he stepped into the hallway, the smell of warm bread drifted upward, inviting and comforting. Downstairs, Mara looked up as he descended the stairs. Her eyes softened, and a natural smile touched her lips. "Good morning," she said gently. "Good morning," Elias replied, returning the smile. "You slept well?" she asked. "Better than I have in weeks," he said honestly. "I'm glad." She motioned toward the table near the fire. "Breakfast is ready. Please sit." Elias sat down, and Mara brought him a plate with fresh bread and a cup of warm tea. He thanked her quietly before taking the first bite. The bread was soft and warm, tasting of care and calm mornings. He ate slowly, savoring each piece. "It's very good," he said. Mara chuckled softly. "I've had many years to practice." He shared a quiet moment, the kind that feels peaceful without needing words. After breakfast, Elias stood and reached for his pack. "I should start preparing my things. The storm looks like it's over." Mara nodded, though her heart sank just a little. "Yes. The road should be clear enough by midday." Elias paused at the base of the stairs. "I want to thank you, Mara, not just for shelter and food, but for last night. Talking with you. It meant a lot." Mara lowered her gaze for a moment, touched by his sincerity. "It meant a lot to me too," she said softly. Elias went upstairs to gather his things. Mara watched him go, then turned to the counter, opening a small wooden drawer. Inside were items she kept for travelers from the town: little gifts, small comforts for long journeys. But for Elias, she wanted something more thoughtful. She pulled out a pair of fresh wool mittens she had sewn over the winter warm. Thick, carefully made. Then she wrapped a portion of her dried winter food, enough for several days of travel. Beside these, she placed a small scarf made from soft wool she had woven herself. Each item held a small part of her time and care. She wrapped everything gently in a piece of cloth and tied it with a simple cord. It wasn't payment. It wasn't a trade. It was her way of returning the quiet kindness he had shown. By the time Elias descended the stairs again, ready to begin his journey, Mara was waiting for him near the door. Snowlight filled the room, bright and soft. "You're leaving?" she asked quietly. Elias nodded. "I should go before the roads get icy again, but I'll always remember this place." Ada held out the bundle to him. "This is for you." Elias looked surprised. For me. Yes, she placed the bundle in his hands. These are things for your journey, food, mittens, a scarf. You gave me more kindness than you realize. I want to return some of it. Elias untied the cloth carefully, his brow softening as he saw what was inside. Mara, this is too much, he said gently. It isn't, she replied. Not compared to what you offered. Not compared to the respect you showed. Please, take it. He looked at her, his eyes warm with gratitude. Thank you, he said, voice low but sincere. I don't often receive gifts. Everyone deserves warmth, Mara said quietly. For a moment, neither moved. Snow still fell lightly outside, making the world feel quiet and still. Elias closed the bundle again and tied it gently. Mara, he said, if I pass through this town again, may I stop here? Her heart softened at the question. You'll always have a place here, she said. He nodded slowly. Deeply touched, then he stepped out into the snow-covered road. Mara followed him to the doorway, watching as he secured his packs and guided his mule forward. The world was bright with fresh snow, the sky clear. Elias turned back once, offering her a grateful smile. Take care, Mara. You too, Elias. He walked down the snowy path, his figure growing smaller with each step. Mara stayed at the doorway long after he disappeared from sight, her hands wrapped around her shawl. The inn felt quiet again, but not lonely, not the way it once had. Something inside her had changed, gently but genuinely. The rest of the day passed slowly. Mara cleaned the room Elias had used, fixed the quilts, and swept the floor. But everything reminded her of the night before, the warmth. The conversation, the quiet honesty between them. Days turned into weeks. And though the inn returned to its usual rhythm, Mara sometimes found herself thinking of the traveler with the gentle eyes and humble kindness. She wondered where he was, if he had found warm places along the road. If the mittens kept his hands from freezing in the mountains. One early spring morning, as the snow began to melt and small green shoots appeared along the edges of the town, Mara received a small wrapped bundle at her doorstep. There was no name, only a simple note. For the warmth you gave me when the world was cold. Inside the bundle were 3 beautifully prepared fursoft, warm and clearly handled with corand, a small carved wooden figure of a pine tree. Simple, honest, thoughtful. Mara held the note close to her chest. She didn't need anyone to tell her who had left it. The story of Elias and Mara spread quietly through the town, passed from one traveler to another, not as a tale of romance or dramatic events, but as a gentle reminder that kindness, even between strangers, can change the coldest nights into warm memories, and somewhere in the mountains. Elias traveled with warm mittens, a soft scarf, and the quiet memory of a widow who had given him much more than shelter. Their paths had crossed only for a single night, but it was enough to leave a mark on both hearts that would not fade with time.